I never thought I'd see this day happen. Mark my words, I never thought I'd see this day happen. 20 years. It is now the 20th year anniversary for the Fate franchise. And with it is the announcement of something that I thought would never, ever happen. Yes, the English release of Fate Stay Night, the original visual novel that started it all, is finally getting an English release and technically Chinese release. An English release for everybody to enjoy. This is a version that was originally on the Vita, that was like a remaster that just had everything kind of cleaned up, plus also, of course, a lot of the H stuff removed from it. It's going to be the censored version. That version is going to be ported over to Steam and the Switch. No PlayStation release, and I'll get into that in a minute. But at least Steam and Switch is getting a release of this. And again, like I said, it's going to have options for simplified Chinese and English. Now, like I said at the very beginning, the main key thing here to note is 20 years. And despite the fact that I wake up and I see this news and it excites me, I'm like, finally, something that honestly me and Chris on the podcast talked about endlessly about how, why is this happening yet? When the whole Clannad thing happened, and how massive that, you can't see it because it's behind my head. When that whole thing happened, it's way back there in the back of the top of that shelf there. When that happened, it was huge. Everybody's like, finally, Japan is recognizing the West. These visual novels are, they're finally coming over. And even Aniplex themselves was doing a whole bunch of releases on Steam. But where's Fate? And it's sad at this point, 20 years later, that this is finally coming out. And I want to be excited, but there's a side of me that's going, why now? Like, there is still a side of me that's kind of critical in the idea of why now? Why after 20 stinking years are you finally releasing this? Who the hell cares anymore? That thought just popped in my head. But who cares anymore? Like, anybody that wanted to read this visual novel waited 20 years and finally read it through the translations that the fans did. Who's going to buy this? That question immediately popped in my head. I think there's a side of me that's like, I love that this is happening, but there's a side of me that's thinking this is going to be a disaster. This isn't going to sell. Now, to correct here, what I'm assuming this is going to be is it's going to be one version that is going to be sold in Japan. It's going to be sold across, China and of course in America, Europe, everywhere English-speaking locations, and it's going to be one SKU that is going to have a language select. And I'm going to assume that probably anywhere besides Japan is probably going to be strictly digital. It's going to be on Steam and on the eShop. And maybe in Japan they will get a physical Switch version, which if that's the case, that's the one I'll buy. I'll import the physical version just so I can have it physically. I don't like buying on eShops and stuff because I have plenty, especially with Nintendo, I have plenty of consoles that I've bought games on there and their eShops go down. So that's definitely not something I'm doing. I'm going to buy a physical version. That way I can play it whenever the hell I want. But again, who's going to buy this? Instead of the only people that I can see, the mass majority of like fans that are going to be buying this are going to be buying the physical version just to have it on their shelf. I just think that anybody that wanted to read this visual novel at this point has read it. I feel like I'm like the minority. Like I'm going to be that person that is like, oh yeah, finally I can read it if I ever get time. I'm the minority. I don't think that most like super fans that are actually going to buy this game, that would buy the game anyways, have any desire to get it now because they've had 20 years to read this thing. And it just seems sad. It just seems sad that at the same time that I'm excited, I think it's not going to do well, which is scary to say because the Fate franchise is huge. I have tons of figurines over here. I have pretty much all of my Unlimited Blade Works and Fate Stay Nights, all the movies and everything is down here in a cabinet. I have tons of stuff on my wall that's Fate related. I mean, there's a poster over here that's from Aniplex. The Fate franchise is huge, and it's sold so freaking well. The Fate Grand Order is massive, even globally. And it's like, why did it take so long for the original, where it all started, the original visual novel? Why did it take 20 years for it to finally get an English release? Now, yes, the original complaint that a lot of people had, the original reason why a lot of people would say that the original Fate franchise is not going to come over, the visual novel, is because, yes, it was H. It had H in there. And that was a kind of a stopping point. But I think a lot of people assumed with releases like on Vita and stuff like that, it could have easily gotten a Western release because those versions were, yes, cleaned up. It took all that mana transferring out of it, and thus it was wholesome enough to come over to the West. But I think at least, obviously with the Vita version, probably released in Japan when Japan was still doing really well with the Vita, whereas over in the West, Vita was doing crappy. So they probably didn't port it over at that point for that reason. But you kind of assume that it would have gotten a Steam release at this point. This release right here probably should have happened way back there. But I'm kind of repeating myself there. I just think it's kind of a weird thing. It's a little bit too late, and it kind of sucks in that regard. It sucks that I have that thought process that a little too late. That where was this a long time ago? And yes, that I think that it's not going to do well. I think it's just not going to sell well. I want to be surprised. I want to see Steam sales or the Steam plate charts and all that kind of stuff are just booming. But we'll wait and see that. Like I said, depending on how it gets released, if it gets a physical Switch version, I'm definitely going to probably grab that. But that aside, I've seen most. It is so funny because, like, I think while I'm complaining about the fact that it took 20 years, I think most of the discourse around what's happening here, this announcement, most people are just seemingly upset. Most people that are upset because it's not getting a PlayStation release. I'm gonna fill some people in on here. And part of this is speculation, but part of it has been kind of confirmed through discussions, interviews with certain individuals. This is a problem that I think Japan in general has, which is, yes, extremely shocking because Aniplex, the one that is going to be doing this release, Aniplex, the one that's doing announcements for this release, and then you have the ownership of Aniplex is literally Sony themselves. Why would it not have a Sony PlayStation version? Japan developers don't really like PlayStation. It seems that way. For one, yes, technically, for visual novels, the visual novel scape is not really on PlayStation. It is on Switch right now. It is on Steam right now. It is on PC. It is not anywhere on PlayStation. And yes, there's a lot of developers in Japan that don't like Sony PlayStation of America, which is pretty much the headquarters of PlayStation. They don't like working with them. I've heard tons of horror stories of developers from Japan that are like, it takes too long to get things approved through them. It's a hassle. They're nitpicky. They take too long to respond. They don't process our requests fast enough. We have to do this whole approval process, and they're taking forever, and then they have these stupid complaints. That's why most every visual novel is pretty much going to Switch or Steam. It's because those two locations, they're very quick, and they get it done. And they're not nitpicky about things. It's a funny state right now, but yes, technically, we've had a flip-flop in censorship. While, Nintendo, who used to be like, everything must be sanitized. We want to see no skin. Cover up those girls. Put a cloak around them. You cannot see their faces. They cover them up. That's how Nintendo was. And then we went to Switch, and suddenly Nintendo's like, bring it in. Bring it in. Bring in all that stuff. Senran Kagura? Yeah, bring that on in. That's the new Nintendo. Sony PlayStation, on the other hand, again, over there in that nice little state of California and United States, that is the new PlayStation. And they are super picky about anything that comes out of Japan. They do not want any skin shown. They're just absolutely terrified of anything questionable. And so, yes, you're seeing a lot of these companies are not wanting to work with that. So that's why it's probably not getting a PlayStation release, despite the fact that this is literally Aniplex. It's just not something they want to do anymore. And again, a lot of it has to do with the fact that, like, with Japan, there's not really a gaming sphere around PlayStation. It's mostly just Switch and PC. And so, yes, if they're trying to hit a broader audience for visual novels, the visual novel crowd is on Switch and it's on PC. So they're not going to make a PlayStation version. It might come down the road. Maybe it's probably going to be simple enough they could just go, yeah, okay, we'll port it over. But I don't think it would sell. Like, I'm already making complaints about it. I'm not thinking this series is going to be selling all that well. And now to put it on PlayStation, where, again, doesn't really have much of a user base in Japan, and probably not globally, is going to be grabbing it on a visual novel for PlayStation. It's just a thing. But anyways, I have talked far more than I actually planned. I plan on this being like a 2-minute video. But anyways, all my complaints aside, I feel like I'm a super negative Nancy on this. Probably gonna get a bunch of dislikes because I'm supposed to be happy about this. I am happy about this. I think this is fantastic. Again, I've been waiting for this for a long time. And I think with the whole success of Clannad, I figured it would be sooner, but it was scary how long it took them to finally acknowledge, oh yeah, maybe we should release that original story. Yes, technically it's going to be censored. Again, it's the Vita version, but it's a release. It's a story. And there's improvement apparently with the Vita version that they'll have in there as well. This is like the definitive version that doesn't have the H scenes, basically. So I'll definitely be picking it up. I don't know how quickly I'll get around to doing it. It's going to be releasing in 2024, which is also surprising. So they've been working on this for a while, but it's great news. I hope it does well. Because it's going to be one of those things where it's totally going to be one of those things where they finally release it. They're like, well, see, it didn't sell very well. Because it took you 20 years. Nobody, you got like this group of people that don't even know what it is. This group of people's like, well, yeah, I've read it already. I guess I'll buy it. It's just difficult in that regard. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video as always. If you did, make sure to hit that like button down below. Comment. Let me know what you think of this whole announcement. Do you think it's like too little too late? Are you just super happy you'll be buying it anyways? Put it on your shelf. What's your thoughts? Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button to get my content. I do news reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate what it does. And y'all take care.